encourage you to think about is balance. It's very important when we think about sustainability that we think about not just our own interests and our own experiences. And all of you come to this hackathon with incredible experiences and qualifications and understanding from different perspectives. But it's really important that we understand balance, because the whole concept and theory behind sustainability came about when researchers were looking at the theory of community and sustainable development. And in looking at sustainability, there was an agreement that sustainability is about balance. It's about environmental, economic, and social issues all being addressed and all working in harmony. I suppose the approaches and the solutions, thinking about these three areas of our communities, because if we only address one or the other, then we're not getting that balance correct. So each of those pillars, environmental, economic, and social, are pillars of good sustainability and good sustainable cities and communities. But we need to make sure that there is balance in our understanding of what the issues are, but also in terms of our solutions. So think about this weekend, what are your interests and what are your motivations? What do you want to see better in the world and in your city and in your community? But then listen to other people's perspectives. Make sure that you're not being, too blinkered in terms of what you think the answer should be. And really make sure that your group has at least had that discussion about, are we getting the balance right? And of course, you can't do everything. You can't really save the world. We all do our own bit that collectively creates this impact. But I think by just understanding balance, that's a really good place to start. And then we'll all understand the role that we play in creating sustainable solutions. So that's my first one, and it really just does make us think about the fact that you're trying to create solutions for today, which is what we need, but also really think about solutions for the future as well. So what are you doing to try and address the issues that you're facing and your city or community is facing today, but making sure then that this balance is going to be, held over into the future as well. So sustainability balances these pillars, but it really thinks about the current state, but also the future state. How can we leave a legacy for the people that are coming after us? And how can we make sure that what we're doing is really important, I suppose, not just for us, but for also future generations. So think about that as well. My second tip is to really try and understand the problem that you're addressing. This is an area that I've seen a lot of people just miss, the importance of really understanding why things happen. Good or bad, but obviously you're looking at, ways that you can make social impact. So we're looking at problems and we're looking at, why is there destruction? Why is there unemployment? Why is there, litter, for instance? And I want you to really take some time to ask yourself the question, why? In fact, some people would say you need to ask yourself at least 5 whys before you really understand why the problem is happening, because there is always causes and effects. And often we just look at the effects, but we need to really look at the causes of the problem. Now, for example, if you were very interested in ocean pollution, for instance, and that was one of the things that you really wanted to address, you would really have to ask yourself a number of whys around ocean pollution. Why does it happen? And if you go and do some research, you'll find that there are many reasons why ocean pollution occurs. And so you need to then not only understand the problem, but then you have to say, well, what can we do about that? Is it just going and cleaning up the ocean? Well, maybe, but is there something else that you can do to even prevent the pollution in the first place? So it's really up to you and your team and what you're doing, but really getting a good handle on that problem is so important. And the other thing I just wanted to touch on here as well is the use of empathy. And I know you're going to talk about design thinking and hopefully human-centered design in a few minutes. But what I love about that approach is that we always start with empathy. So we don't just ask ourselves why. We use empathy and say, why is that? Why do the people litter? Or why do the systems occur like that? Or why does this happen? And we use empathy in that approach. So it's really a critical element of our understanding and looking for solutions. I wanted to give you just a little example here. This is an organisation in Australia called Sarah's Food Fair, and they really looked at some of the problems that were occurring in their city. And I've named a few here. There was an increase in poverty and food insecurity, obesity and malnutrition, local producers needed fair trade, customers want affordable organic fruit and veg, and refugees, those seeking asylum, and recently arrived migrants needing employment. Now, that's a lot of, issues to address. And you may think, wow, could one organisation really address all of those issues? But obviously having a think about and understanding what the issues are and understanding why these problems occur allowed this organisation to really think about how they could start addressing these many problems that were occurring in their city. So the organisation then is called Sarah's Fair Food, and they developed an online ethical grocery store. But it was really about supporting local farmers and helping them both with their economic, development in terms of their food sales and suppliers, but really supporting them through fair trade as well. The organisation also employs migrants and asylum seekers, so there's also an employment solution there as well. But then they work with communities, then they spread themselves to be able to work with local communities. But they're also thinking about the environmental issues that are involved in groceries and food security. And they also then go out and educate kids and adults about how to create sustainable solutions in their own homes. So it's an amazing organisation that really has thought about some of the problems, thought about, all three pillars, the sustainability pillars, and really thought about how can we grow and develop and encourage people to support what we're doing and get involved. So I thought that was a really nice example to show you how you don't have to try and achieve everything, but really when you understand some of the problems, it does allow you to come up with solutions. The third tip I want to give you is to be clear and transparent about your values. Sometimes if we're not transparent about our values, people can get a little bit lost with what we're actually trying to achieve. And also it doesn't help you as a team if you're not really clear on your values and what your goals are. So be very clear right up front about what it is that you value and what it is that you'd like to impact, or how you'd like to impact your community. I wanted to give you an example here of Soft Landing. Soft Landing is also an Australian social enterprise. They recycle mattresses, and they have quite a big organisation now recycling mattresses and selling mattresses. And if you go and have a look at their website, you'll see they're very clear about their values and how they're making impact and what they're trying to do to address some of the environmental problems that we have in this industry. So Soft Landing is a really great example of a social enterprise that addressed the social, environmental and economic issues that they wanted to address. And I really like them as a really good example of how they're doing that. I've just taken a screenshot from their website actually to show you an example of how they're really clear about what they're trying to achieve. And they say, we keep waste out of landfill, transport miles down, and use recycling methods with less environmental footprint. And they've even got this nice little diagram as well. So you don't always have to have it in written language. You can do some really nice graphics that just simply explains what is it that we're trying to do? What is the ultimate goal and how are we doing that? So I really like Soft Landing and their approach and how they've addressed the issues that they felt are important to them. The other example I want to give you is Yasmin from the world's biggest garage sale. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're based in Brisbane here. And Yaz and her team have also really become very clear in what their goals are. And Yaz was working in the corporate sector. I don't believe she was in this particular sector at all initially. She came from corporate. But something that really she wanted to address was waste. And so she started to think about, well, what could we do to, I think she even started just thinking about how to raise money for charities that were addressing this issue. And yet through ideation and kind of testing different solutions, she kind of built this organization that's now quite large and she's winning awards for her work. So Yaz and the biggest garage sale, the world's biggest garage sale, is all about recycling and redeveloping waste. So trying to keep things out of landfill as much as possible. So she says in her website that the world's biggest garage sale, we're tackling the issue of waste through landfill diversion by activating dormant goods for good with our circular economy and resource recovery practices. Our efforts promote sustainability and responsible consumerism and provide employment opportunities for vulnerable members of our community. So you can really see she's been very clear about what she's doing. And again, if you go to her website, you'll see that she's very clear about the values and what it is that they're trying to do. And it's scaled massively in the last couple of years because she's been so clear about it that everybody's gotten on board. And I think she says there's over 4,000 people now through different avenues who are getting on board, donating, supporting, buying, selling, recycling, all sorts of things. So this is the power of ideating and really just testing solutions and seeing what resonates with people who have the same values as yourself. The fourth tip I wanted to give you was around get comfortable with the uncomfortable and naysayers. It's going to be a hard job to come up with an idea and then really try and just face some of the questions that you're going to have. Now, that doesn't mean those questions are bad. You must be willing to have questions from people, but don't get down on those naysayers who come and challenge you. Fight for what you really want to achieve. And again, this is the beauty of ideation, is that you can try and test different things depending on, what support you get. So be uncomfortable. It's okay. It's really about stepping outside of your comfort zone and seeing, what could we do that's going to work? And we've got to fail sometimes before we actually find a really good solution. So don't be surprised when you come up against hurdles, or even if you think that didn't work or that doesn't seem to be working for me. That's good. That means that you're pressing through and you're pressing in, and you actually just got to keep yourself really curious and asking lots and lots of questions from people who both support you, but also are challenging you as well. Number 5 is look for a shared vision. I've just seen the time and realized I've got to speed up a little bit. But I want you to really think then that sometimes you don't always have to come up with a brilliant idea yourself if you're not that creative. Have a look at what other people are saying they want to achieve and look for the shared vision and say, how could we support another organization innovatively? So it might be that they need help to achieve something, and you could come in and go, well, we can solve that problem that you have, that you're looking for. You're looking for a solution. I was just going to mention Kellogg's Better Days. Now, Kellogg's is clearly not a social enterprise, but they do have some very good targets around sustainability and looking at corporate social responsibility. And if you have a look at the video around Kellogg's Better Days, you'll see it's very inspirational about what they want to achieve. And so as social enterprises, you can come and say, how can I help an organization like Kellogg's to achieve this social impact that they want to create? So if you're getting stuck, if you're finding your creativity isn't, you know, as full and as creative as you want it to be, go and have a look at what some other people are trying to achieve and say, how could we support that? And number 6 is know what value is being created for who. You should always have that very clear. Who are we trying to create value for? Bion Slat, Bion, I think that's how you say his name. He's a great example. Bion Slat is a social innovator in Europe, in California, sorry, or Europe. And he was really thinking again about the oceans and how he could look at marine pollution. Came up with a fantastic social innovation, but didn't have a lot of funding to develop this innovation around cleaning up the oceans. And so his idea led him to think about how he could create recycled sunglasses and use that to fund his work in addressing marine pollution. If you have a look at what he does, it's incredible. But he had to think about, how can I show people the importance of looking after our oceans and recycling pollution. So it's a fantastic story about how the sunglasses came about, and you might want to look into that a little bit. Okay, my last tip then is measure your impact. And you might think, oh, is that something we've got to think about now? We're just at the beginning of the journey. But yes, you have to start thinking about it right from the beginning. So when you're coming up with solutions, think about, how would we measure that? How would we know if we're actually achieving some success? And it really doesn't matter how you do that, or even how small that measurement is, as long as you've got something to push you forward, both because you want to celebrate your wins, but also because you want to test and measure and to see if what your solution is creating any outcomes. So always think about your SDG, think about what your targets are in terms of your solution, and just say, well, what's 1 or 2 little ways that we could begin to measure our impact, and then report to people how this is making a difference. So don't forget to measure your impact. Start thinking about that from the beginning, and then it will be a lot easier as you grow and scale. There you go. Those are my 7 tips for you today. I'll stop my share and see if you have any questions or thoughts.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Before I continue speaking, can I confirm that I can be heard properly? Because sometimes I do have audio problems.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, that's amazing.
Loud and clear.
Thanks to say. Thank you so much, Ruth, for that insightful and inspiring lightning talk. It was just around, I think, more than 10 minutes. And thanks for sharing about your work around social impact in Australia. You know, sometimes when people think about Australia or the United States, we don't necessarily think that these countries have social issues, right? Especially for me, like when I visited the States in 2015, this is one of the things that struck me, that they also have homeless people, they do have issues around poverty, food insecurity, etc. And I guess the main point for one of the main points for our discussion this morning is that regardless of where you operate, social or sustainable enterprises have a role to play in addressing what we call some of the grand challenges of the time, really. So, again, as mentioned by Jose a while ago, I'm John Uminga. I'm one of the alumnus of Australia Awards from University of Sydney. Now I'm connected with the Queensland University of Technology. And Ruth is actually one of my supervisors. So I'm really happy to have you here, Ruth. And not to take the little time that we have a couple of, we have some room for a couple of questions. So if you do have questions, um, please pop them in the chat box or send them privately to me, please. But I guess we have one question here, Ruth, that was sent to me directly. And I think this is really interesting because we are still, lest we forget, we're still in COVID pandemic. And I think this is really an important context to discuss in relation to efforts, building businesses that are sustainable and impactful. The question goes, what new sustainability ideas have emerged in response to changes in behavior because of the pandemic, specifically in Australia where you're operating, but also globally? Are there observations that you would like to share or any insights around the question?
Well, I think the first thing is I think we're all aware that technology has just played a massive part in our ability to respond to COVID and the pandemic. There are many organizations that never use technology to the point that they do right now, even 12 months later. And we've all had to think about how technology can improve our lives when we're, isolated, we can't move around, we can't do business as usual. So I think my takeaway from the pandemic is that we've got to be ready to pivot, to change the way that we do things at any given time. And technology is obviously helpful. The fact that I'm with you today, zooming in from Australia, means that technology has enabled us to just do things differently. So please don't ignore the power of technology and think about, well, if I couldn't move around or I couldn't do something like this, would there be another way that I could do it? And just to be always open to change. I think the businesses that have failed during the pandemic are those businesses that just couldn't think creatively enough and quick enough to really adapt. And that's obviously extremely sad. So what we want in the future is adaptable and agile organizations. And we've used those words for a long time, but I think the pandemic has really shown us why. So use the best of everything that we've got and be willing to change and respond to whatever life might throw at you. It might be anything, not just the pandemic, but anything could throw at you. So be creative, stay creative, whatever you're doing.
Thank you. That's really important points, right? So you have to be creative, adaptable, and also there's opportunities in these troubles. So I think for entrepreneurial people, this is really an opportunity for them to think about business ideas or develop further business ideas. Um, okay, so we still have some time for one question, but I guess when we talk about sustainability, it's really going beyond the basic questions of, is my business harmful? Is my product or service needed by society? Or does my business somehow relate to the SDGs? And I think when I was looking at the program for the hackathon, not only today, but the previous one, you were talking about greenwashing, but there's also a concept of rainbow washing, which is, using the SDGs to market your business or your product. I guess the question, Ruth, would be, what do you think would be, um, or how do you think the businesses or the people intending to start a business can avoid using greenwashing or rainbow washing just to promote their businesses and really remain authentic to what they're trying to build underground?
Look, I think the SDGs are a fantastic sort of North Star for people. They are global goals that we can all understand why they've been developed. And we're all doing our own little part. So keeping the SDGs as this kind of higher kind of goal, but keeping it as a sort of, you know, shared vision amongst your team, amongst your city, amongst your community, that's totally fine. What we don't want to do is get so constrained by that, though, that we can't be open to new ideas and suggestions. And but I'm sure that you're in your creative minds and the creative ways that you think about the problem, and that's what I started with, is really understanding the problem and then just double checking. So is that aligned with any of the goals? Does that kind of meet any kind of aspirations of similar businesses or other people in my community? So I really think that the SDGs are a great, North Star for us all. It creates that shared vision, but don't let it restrain you either. Just have a think about, well, yeah, what SDG could we say that we are most important about, caring most about? Again, it's that little tip that I gave you about being clear about your values. So the SDGs can help you communicate that. We're really interested in, SDG 10, for instance, or SDG 4, quality. It allows you to really be clear about what you care about and then creating avenues for people who also care about that to get involved with you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. It's really unfortunate that we don't have a lot of time to really dig into deeper questions. We do, but I think I'm fortunate because I have access with you. So, but for the participants who are in the room, feel free to just send questions to Ruth
Sure.
and actually be able to send them to Ruth via email or whatever.
Yes, that's not a problem.
Hear it again. So that ends our forum. Thanks again for the 7 tips. I think these are really basic questions and basic reminders for everyone who's starting a business. And maybe just a quick sharing. There's also the concepts of SDG opportunism, SDG denial, and SDG evangelism. So evangelism is really using the SDGs to improve your business operations, to really try to develop the systems and processes inside the organization. Denial, which actually struck me, there are people who are actually using SDG denial, saying that SDGs are, sorry for the word, bullshit, and we don't believe in the United Nations, and this is a highly politicized organization. And another one is SDG opportunism. So a lot of people really see opportunities in using SDGs as a way to, for example, raise funds, raise resources, get partners. And I think having said these, while we're talking about sustainability and sustainable development goals, it's just a reminder that there's many different ways to look into and to use SDGs. So again, without further ado, thank you so much, Ruth, for joining us this morning. Thank you for the opportunity to moderate this quick forum. And if we can have a quick photo as requested by the organizers, for the participants, please kindly turn on your camera. It would be lovely to see every one of you. I mean, you did have your first session already, but Ruth and myself haven't seen you, so it would be great to see you guys.